Hey everybody, it's Cody Menz here. I'm making a video about how I would implement some changes into World of Tanks here in 2019, say fix the game, more or less fix some problems that have been going on in the game for quite some time, or more or less are just hot topics that the community as a whole wants. Wargaming kind of kicked everything off with Wargaming Fest in December, talking about changes they're planning on doing to, say, premium rounds, matchmaking, bringing front lines back, etc., etc. If you don't know what I'm talking about, there's a link in the video description below. Kind of goes over, all their details laid out on the World of Tanks portal. Now, the changes I'm going to be talking about here, they're mostly, my opinion. I've been playing the game since 2011, making guides, so on and so forth. I'm pretty involved in the community as well, to where during my live streams, if you haven't caught me during my live streams, I've been putting polls up recently, gathering feedback on these specific topics to make sure that I'm not crazy, and people actually kind of want to see these changes. Most of these are pretty realistic, I feel like, to where they're not like crazy changes that Wargaming would have to basically devote a ton of resources to and change huge parts of the game, and basically, who knows if it'll actually work. To me, these are changes I've either come up by myself, or more or less almost all of them I feel like have been suggested at some point, and a lot of people kind of reiterate them, and even Wargaming themselves, like kicking off with matchmaking here. I'll be talking about matchmaking, equipment changes, as you can see here, also artillery, the premium round changes, some stuff for like premium accounts, so on and so forth. This video is going to be covering a bunch of different areas. I plan on making a part 2, kind of focusing on, say, like specific tanks, say like in a tier, or basically tanks as a whole, changing like stats, attributes, stuff like that. But part 1 here is just like a general how to fix the game as a whole for, basically the benefit of, I think, the majority of people. Starting off here though with matchmaking. So they've recently tested, ±1 matchmaking on the Asian server. I think everybody loved it, and even Wargaming themselves, I believe, even said it's most likely going to come at some point. More or less, I completely agree. No problems with that. ±1 matchmaking or same tier battles, I feel like seeing them like 75% of the time, maybe ±2, like 25% of the time. Most people can get behind that, and alongside of that, changing the whole template thing to where you see matchmaker kind of bend the rules here or there, but I feel like Wargaming getting away from the templates. You've seen them kind of test that on that Asian server, kind of new matchmaking test that they did. So instead of, say, 357, more or less the only like rules for matchmaking outside of trying to keep it same tier, ±1, or the ±2, but a very small percentage, is just capping SPGs. Instead of it being 3, lowering that down to 2. That hands down was like the highest thing voted on. Like when I put it up for a vote, you had options of 0, 1, 2, 3, to where Wargaming, they're not going to basically take RD out of the game. Whether or not you agree with me, they're not just going to do it. Just basically join real life and get over the whole remove RD from the game, because it's not happening. But more or less, between like lowering it down to 1 or 2, most people feel like 2 is a pretty good compromise. I completely agree with that. So, and then grand battles, capping them at 3 instead of, I believe it's at like 4 right now, if I'm not mistaken, possibly 5, but I think it's 4. But anyway, more or less, instead of having templates, just keep RD, capped at 2, and based off of what tanks are in the queue, just mirror the teams as best as possible, and get rid of the template thing, to where you can have like soft rules, but instead of like each battle, say like 90% of your battles where you get, ±1 and it's 5 and 10 matchmaking, instead of that hard template, just kind of relax the rules a lot more, so you have a lot more variety, and also it just keeps matchmaking chugging along instead of putting people into templates. So moving on to equipment, you guys probably have already read it since I'm babbling on here. I'm trying to keep the videos short, sweet as possible. more or less, like, I've kind of been suggesting for a while, and I see a lot of other people have equipment kind of scale price with each tier. The only problem that I haven't been able to get like past is like compensating people, you know, after they do the change, and like giving people refunds. Like, that's not the hardest hurdle. It's they'd have to change like the whole way you demount equipment and move it to a different tank. Say if you buy it for a tier 1, you take it off of it, then you move it up to tier 10. Do you pay extra, or is there just like 10 different say kinds of, say, Cody optics, one for each tier? Where I think the easiest solution, because you already don't have most equipment, say on tier 1, 2, and 3, it really starts at tier 4, where you start seeing like basically like gun rammers, stuff like that, is just remove the equipment that costs 500,000 credits or more from tiers 1 to 3. So that would be Cody optics, binocs, gun laying drive, and a toolbox. Pretty sure that's mainly the ones. Or if they took them off tier 1 to 3, it would remove kind of some aspect of, say, an unfair advantage for seal clubbers, veteran players, so on and so forth. Honestly, wouldn't affect the game otherwise down there. It's not like you're nerfing anything. You're just removing some equipment from the tanks. Everything would still play the same, except for veteran players wouldn't have an advantage. And literally all it would take is just unchecking those from tier 1 to 3. I think that's a pretty easy change, because honestly, like I've been saying for years, scale it with tiers. I just haven't found a solution that works about actually, you know, the whole system, like I talked about. So moving on to my next point here is the crew system. So part 1 here with the crew system, which I'm going to pull up kind of side image here too of World of Warships, more or less. In World of Warships, I would like to see the World of Tanks crew system move to something like World of Warships. However, unlike World of Warships, where you just have one captain per ship, and basically then you have the crew tree, as you can kind of see, keep the individual crew setup and makeup like World of Tanks has. So I kind of like stupidly photoshopped over here, so expanding it a little bit, you can kind of see I drew lines down to World of Warships crew tree, because that's just based off of like 4 different tiers. You know, you pick one for the first one, then it unlocks number 2, 3, and 4, and you assign your crew skill points that way for just one captain per ship. I'm saying basically for each tank, depending on the crew makeup, you'll have like gunner, commander, driver, loader, and basically like if the commander, you know, more or less there's just like a commander and gunner, then only 2 more or less crew members will show up, so on and so forth, where you can assign for each tank like the crew skills. It's not exactly as easy as just painting on here 4 crew members onto the tree, but I feel like keeping like the individual crew members in World of Tanks is pretty important in some way, shape, or form. But anyway, moving on, and just, I think I explained that pretty decently without getting confused. That would more or less remove the basic 0 to 100% that you see on crews currently, where if you train, you know, a crew member for the M4 Sherman, and then you try to move it to say like the T20 or even like the Jumbo Sherman without retraining it, you get a penalty. So instead of it being 100% like in the Sherman, it gets penalized because it's not trained for that tank. In this new system, it would be like World of Warships, where more or less any crew member would work within the same nation. It doesn't matter if it's a medium tank, tank destroyer, you know, light, you know, anything. As long as it's the same nation, say all American crew members, commanders would work on all tanks in that commander spot. Same thing with all gunners would work in that same nation. So similar to World of Warships, just tweaked a little bit for World of Tanks. Because more or less, I feel like at this point, like if they move over to say like any different crew system, like say a crew tree, they really just need to get rid of the basic crew training, because it hurts new players, and it's just unfair to new players, to where the longer you play, the better the crews you have, the more basically trained crews you have in specific tanks. Whereas if you're just starting out, like A lot of like the new tutorials Wargaming's done, like they throw crew members at you because it's just such a pain to keep moving crew members, say, to different tiers, whether you're retraining for gold or credits. It's just annoying. I don't think anybody likes it, and it doesn't add anything to the game. So why not just scrap that, let basically crew members work across the entire nation just in their specific role, to where if people still want to, say, change a commander to a gunner, let them do that, charge them gold, so on and so forth. More or less, so moving to this World of Warships-esque crew skill tree, it would allow World of Tanks to basically assign different, say, costs to each crew skill and also perk. So my example that'll be coming up soon will be like Brothers in Arms costing more than, say, I don't know, signal relaying. The most important part of this is something that I'm pretty sure Wargaming is going to do. They haven't like 100% confirmed it, but 6 cents being available for all tanks by default. So currently there's a 3-second delay from when you're spotted to when 6 cents pops off. I feel like add that to every single tank here. Just finally do it. You've talked about it for years. Everybody would love it. To where with the crew skill tree adding in here, they could add a new crew perk to reduce the delay from 3 seconds to 2 seconds. I don't think it should be like immediate or 1 second. Just 1 second, you know, shaved off of there. It doesn't have to cost like a whole lot, or it could cost like, say, you know, middle ground. But finally do it. I feel like it would work in this system. So part 2 here, before I got ahead of myself there, for the crew system change. So expanding upon the new crew skill tree, you know, you're going to have different costs. So like I was saying, signal boosting would cost like 1 skill point because it's not that useful. They could even like scrap that, but for example's sake. Meanwhile, like Brothers in Arms would cost 4 skill points. Like in World of Warships, where certain skills cost more or less. So this idea, expanding upon that, which I think will help the whole seal clubbing, new player experience, and I thought it was pretty awesome. Granted, the game Total War Arena is pretty much dead. Like, it's closing down very soon here, like between Wargaming and Creative Assembly, I believe. The game just didn't work. However, in that game, more or less as your, which I'm just gonna, let me just explain it for World of Tanks. So going off of World of Warships and this World of Tanks crew skill tree I'm talking about, your top tier skills in, say, a fully maxed out crew would just become inert. They would still be there. However, say you take your M48 Patton crew, it has like every single crew skill that, you know, you can get, and it's maxed out, so on and so forth, and you plop that down in like a T1 Cunningham. Your, say, level 4, level 3, so like the best crew skills would just not work in that Cunningham for that battle. Once you put it back in, say, the M48, they would then work again, but at tier 1, say tier 2, tier 3, so on and so forth, like Brothers in Arms would not work from the example I kind of typed out here. Meanwhile, say, basic repair or camouflage, albeit they still are pretty powerful against someone without them, you could still have them kind of work in those low tier battles, because, you know, new players would be able to train them up. And as they unlock the better perks, then say at tier 4 and 5, you just more or less either have them all enabled or don't have like the max ones enabled. Once you get to like tier 6 and up, then all of them work. Something along those lines. I thought that worked out pretty well in Total War Arena, to where more or less at low tiers, your super leveled up strong commanders in that game just couldn't raffle stomp, you know, basically new players. Meanwhile, you could still pull up those commanders to higher tiers and it would still work like they're fully leveled up. I feel like that's the best of both worlds, to where new players, you can still basically fight veteran players. I don't think it works by like creating a safe space like I've seen some other people do in their videos. The matchmaking queue just can't handle that. Like, even with bots added in to, say, like the Latin American server, also the Asian server, the queue times you're just going to be playing against AI, to where I feel like if you put people on a level playing field with like the equipment changes I just talked about, and also like the crew skill change here, it's at least fair. Yeah. Moving along here. All right, so we got through the crew and also matchmaking and equipment. Now onto team damage. So team damage here, remove team damage entirely from AP, APCR, and also heat shells. Just literally, if you shoot an ally with it, it won't do module damage, won't do HP damage, won't affect them at all. Say it can still ricochet off and hit like an enemy and damage, but that's, you know, pretty rare. However, keep HE and also HESH, you know, basically high explosive rounds. They'll be treated differently. So they won't cause any module or crew damage. You won't be able to track anybody. However, any HP damage you hit someone with an HE or HESH shell would basically inflict that damage back onto you. So more or less, say you're in an FE4005, you shoot out an HE shell, it hits your teammate, that damage gets reflected back to you. I'm personally fine with 100%, but I could see like 50%, 25%, you know, something low getting reflected back to you if they feel like that's better. And more or less, the reason why I still think HE and HESH needs that is primarily the HE with artillery, where if there's no team damage at all, Artie can just drop shells. More or less, say there's two enemies and one ally, they can just drop shells without hurting their ally at all. Whereas, you know, say in different circumstances, say it's like 1 versus 1, an enemy versus an ally, and the ally that, you know, is based on your team has you helping them, they're basically at an unfair advantage in a way in that brawl because they have an SPG helping. Yes, it's teamwork. However, it'll take that tactic away from, say, the enemy tank pushing like really close up to your ally and you not being able to assist as easily. You have to place your shot correctly. So Artie will still have to kind of pick their shots carefully, except for instead of all that damage going to that poor teammate that you're shooting at while you're in an SPG, gets reflected back at you. So you have to think a little harder, where it's a little bit of a nerf to an SPG, which a lot of people probably would be happy for, while also keeping the same tactics, I feel like, that are in the game, to where, you know, if you fire at a teammate in an SPG, you're going to be doing harm to your team. It's just coming back to you instead of them. Now, there still will be trolling. I know that this system isn't perfect, except for, like, if they remove all team damage, people are still going to drive in front of you or, like, push you out and ram you. I don't really know how to change that. And also in this, like, say if you're in an SPG or you're shooting HE, someone could, like, drive in front of you and make you shoot them. However, I feel like this system is better than the current system, removes a lot of the trolling capability, while also keeping some sort of, say, team damage penalty and, like, tactics still in the game, which removing it entirely, I feel like, would actually dumb the game down pretty, you know, pretty much in a large way, especially for SPGs. It would actually be a pretty big buff for them in certain circumstances. Now, moving on to SPG changes. Hot topic here, I know. Alright, this is like the big thing of this video, that there's a lot to read, more or less boiling it down to SPGs. A lot of people, especially if you watch me streaming, I don't feel like are the worst thing for World of Tanks out there. Do I think they're implemented perfectly? No. I think they're better than they once were before, with the higher damage, so on and so forth. Albeit, you know, everybody gets annoyed when you get focused on by Artie, which with the matchmaking changes I kind of suggest it. And also, I believe Wargaming is going to do, instead of 3 Artie in a battle, you'll see 2. So that'll help just right there. What I'm basically recommending is adding siege mode. So we already have it on Swedish TDs. Basically, adding it in like that to SPGs, where it takes 1 to 2 seconds. Say, they could make it different, you know, spread across the tiers, but I feel like just adding like a basic 1 to 2 second to enter SPG siege mode and also get out of it as well would be nice. So inside of siege mode, your gun traverse, and also for SPGs that have turrets, the turret traverse and the hold traverse. So basically just aiming in general, like tracking a target. would see a debuff. So basically like Swedish TDs, where when you're in siege mode, they can pivot, but more or less you're turning, you're moving, you're just moving generally slower. So debuffing that, so more or less you're like quote unquote like digging in. I've seen people reference for SPGs, and you're not able to track, say, fast moving targets like over 30 kilometers an hour. So like faster heavies, mediums, and lights, you won't be able to track very well. You're just not fast enough in this siege mode. More or less the only way you'll be able to hit them is if like you aim ahead and someone's moving into your target, then you hit them, and then they, you know, still move away. You'll have to exit siege mode or kind of track them, and it'll take you some time to catch up to them. To kind of compensate for this, you'll get a small buff to the current stats that SPGs have, where your aiming time is a little, you know, better, and also the accuracy, like nothing significant to where it's like pinpoint accurate, gets a small buff, say 0.02 through 0.04, just kind of throwing like an idea out there, in siege mode. So you're a little bit more accurate, a little bit better aiming time. However, more or less you have to enter this mode and you're not able to track as easily moving targets. So you're able to, say, focus on one like section of the map without being restricted to moving. However, moving between targets is a little slower, especially if a target's moving. Now, this would lead to SPGs being able to counter battery each other more, because you'd have a lot more SPGs stationary. So basically, it would still make it a little bit hard, because for an SPG to kind of counter battery, they'd have to enter siege mode, be faced, you know, at that spot, and if they're not aiming at the right spot, tracking one would be hard. And since it only takes 1 to 2 seconds to exit siege mode, after you fire, exit and try to run away, so chances of you getting hit directly are still a little low, albeit I will say to get counter batteried, it does raise that chance pretty significantly. But to me, I think that's actually a pretty good change. I think arty players, it keeps you on your toes a little more. For people that hate arty, it opens up counter battery a little bit more between arties, so you might get shot a little bit less. And, you know, more or less arty has something more to think about outside of just sitting in the spot, clicking, moving forward for 2 seconds, shooting, moving back 2 seconds, you know. Outside of siege mode, more or less the stats would all stay the same. Currently what we have, except for aiming time and also overall accuracy and on the move accuracy, would get nerfed a little bit. Nothing drastic, but just to hurt their chances more or less to use outside of siege mode and basically hit people on the fly, to where you still would be able to use that, you know, top-down view like you currently can. However, you do have a penalty for not entering siege mode, to where you're less accurate, your aiming time's a little bit longer. So you still can shoot things, you still can shoot lights coming at you, you can defend yourself, albeit you're a little less accurate. And also the same thing with counter battery. If you're worried about it, you don't have to enter the siege mode, to where you just suffer an accuracy penalty. Last but not least is a buff to HP for all SPGs. Some people might freak out like, oh god, this person is suggesting we buff SPGs. But due to like more counter battery that should happen with siege mode being added, you know, add 10 to 15% HP. It's not that much for pretty much all SPGs. Hey, you have more HP if you're a light tank or something to shoot at, you know, and basically farm later on in the battle. It'll raise your WN8 if you're happy about that. But it should be enough to where a little bit of a buff, like 10 to 15%. Maybe it'll need more, but I think that would be fine. You should die if, say, you're counter batteried and it hits you directly, which you'd still easily die by like a small buff to the HP like this. However, if you get like splashed, you know, off to the side and stuff, you should be able to survive like 1 or 2 of them, where some people would still argue like, oh, they deserve to die if they get splashed by counter battery. Well, arty already has, you know, pretty bad DPM. A lot of things going against it, to where if they're getting counter batteried more and say they survive a splash, they're still getting stunned, they're still having to move, going back into siege mode, aiming back in, and they might get counter batteried again, where it's a pretty drastic change, to where it's not like mind-blowingly new. It's just using that siege mode already in the game and tweaking it a little bit. Alright, that's the big thing that was with this video. I'm glad I got through that. Levi, you were not very much help to me down here. Alright, moving on to premium rounds. This looks like a lot, but more or less my opinion on the matter of, like, they announced at Wargaming Fest they are scrapping, you know, premium rounds essentially and changing it to special ammo. Don't rebrand it, it's stupid. Honestly, it's not to say embarrassing, but more or less they're looking to nerf the damage potential of, say, special rounds by 25%. So APCR, heat, you know, 25% less damage, same higher penetration as we currently have. And they haven't started to, say, adjust the prices and stuff. They left it the same right now in super tests, so on and so forth, where I feel like as long as you balance the rounds so there's trade-offs, like I kind of list it, you know, each round here, where like AP's kind of average at everything, but it has the best normalization and like the least amount of, say, pen drop off at long range. Meanwhile, say APCR does lower damage, has higher pen and speed, however, worse normalization, and also say the pen drops off at longer range, so on and so forth. Balance the rounds like you're currently trying to do, so wargaming, to where there's trade-offs between them, but don't force people to, say, use certain rounds just because they cost different amounts. Balance the rounds correctly to where I feel like the current 25% damage reduction on, say, APCR and heat, and then Hesh is treated differently. It's only going to be on, say, like type 4, type 5 heavies. Don't know how they're going to do like the British TDs, but basically Hesh is just going to be less than, say, the Derp Gun HE damage. However, give it more penetration than HE, but a lot less than, say, an AP or APCR round. I feel like that system, it works to where you don't need to rebrand it as like special rounds and stuff. Just give people the option to use rounds and don't force them to pay different costs, in my opinion. Some might disagree with that, but I just don't feel like the cost needs to be something drastically different. Now, last but not least here, kind of rambling on still, premium account. Some changes that I think should come to the premium account. So at first, like a lot of people, which I think Wargaming's kind of testing it, they've done it in World of Warships where there's a World of Warships premium account where if you buy that, doesn't work, say, in World of Tanks or World of Warplanes, where you get more credits, experience, stuff like that. That could happen to where if they remove like the higher price to premium shells, or if they want to call them special shells, whatever, like I still feel like 50% credits on the premium account's fine and the 50% experience. However, add in plus 50% crew experience on top of that, to where if they change, say, the crew skills to like a crew tree and also allow you to move your crews around easier, I think that would be a pretty nice buff. Something that's been rumored that they've talked about, and you know, little leaks here or there, who knows how true they are, blacklisting maps. So I don't feel like it should be more than 2 maps. So if you have a premium account, allow you to blacklist 2 maps, any in the game that you really hate and don't want to see. However, you can only change it once every 7 days. So you can't say, oh, I'm going to grind like my super heavy tanks, so I'm going to blacklist any large open maps that they are not very good on. And then like an hour later, you switch your map, so I'm going to start playing light tanks. So it's, you know, check off, you know, city maps, say like Himmelsdorf, and I'm not going to play them. Make it so there's a time frame as to how often you can change it. And then something to where I feel like if Wargaming puts it on the premium or premium account where you need it to enter, say, a bond shop, I'd be fine with that. Or they could just open it to everybody. But I kind of added it to the premium account just, you know, to give, I guess, another boost to the premium account. Albeit, I feel like people without a premium account, you're not earning enough bonds either way, because a lot of the, say, bond earning potential in World of Tanks is at high tiers like tier 10. Also like grand battles, and also, you know, coming maybe like frontline and rank battles. That's where you earn a lot of bonds, also like clan wars. So putting a bond shop in the game to where if you're a premium account holder, you can purchase tanks that were, say, removed from the tech tree. Special tanks, the initial tanks I feel like could be like the FV215B 183, Also that version of the tank, but the heavy tank, AMX 50 Foch 155, SG 122 54, the Awful Panther, T22 medium tank. However, don't put clan war tanks in there. Basically, people that do clan wars, they deserve those tanks because clan wars is basically like a second job. The cost I kind of floated around to where this is based off of, you know, equipment for bonds. The improved equipment's already pretty expensive, you know, like 5,000 bonds roughly per piece. You know, somewhere a little bit less at like 4,000, stuff like that. However, make it so any special tank that they add into the bond shop, it costs, you know, 1,500 bonds per tier. So that would make a tier 8 tank more or less cost 12,000 bonds. Tier 10 tank 15,000 bonds. To where it seems really high, but if they make it too low, then, you know, people are just going to get all the tanks and they have nothing to work towards. To where it's adding like another end game element, and they can also add in other ways to earn bonds, like the special events they do occasionally throughout the year, rank battles, stuff like that, to where they could make it a little bit easier to earn them if you basically compete, excuse me, knocking into my microphone, compete and also, you know, play the game more. I think that would be an awesome idea. They've talked about it, and I think it would work out pretty well bringing those tanks back into the game that people, you know, really want, or bringing like new special tanks. Anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. It's a little bit longer than I thought, a little over 30 minutes, you know, of me ranting here. Oh, he's like, I heard that we're done. To where, if you have any comments on this video, please put them in the comment section below, to where I'm interested to see your guys' take on this. And if you have any other ideas about changes, you know, basically you want to see in World of Tanks that are within reason, because trust me, I have other ideas that I would love to come. Some you just can't say expect the game developer to implement everybody's unique idea, because it, you know, not everyone's gonna like it, you know, for lack of better words. Like, it's just trying to keep things, like, if you have suggestions about like what you think will work out of this, or what you think you might not work, or expanding upon it, please leave it in the comment section. Also, feel free to pop into my live stream on Twitch. I always like talk about stuff like this, you know, bring up topics, answer questions and stuff, where I'd love to see you there as well. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching this video, where like I mentioned in the beginning, if you haven't seen the changes coming up in 2019, more or less pop into the link below that kind of outlines what Wargaming Fest they went over. And otherwise, thanks for tuning in, I should say, and hanging around for 30 minutes here listening to me talk. But anyway, have a good one. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you